14 pediatric specialists had examined 7-year-old Nico Castellano. 2 hospitals had failed him. His father had flown in a doctor from Geneva. When the boy's throat started closing again, it was the woman everyone called just the nanny who named the problem in 14 seconds. Before we get to how she saved his life and the betrayal she uncovered inside the family, like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next twist. Because the nanny didn't just catch what 14 doctors missed, she caught who wanted the Mafia heir dead. The estate's private clinic smelled of antiseptic and fear. Little Nico Castellano lay on the exam table, his face swollen beyond recognition, one eye sealed shut, his lips stretched tight and shiny like a balloon about to burst. His breathing came in short, wet whistles. Dr. Yoon Park, the 4th specialist called in that month, pressed a stethoscope to the boy's chest with hands that weren't quite steady. "Airways narrowing again," Park said. "Epinephrine isn't holding this time." Dominic stood at the foot of the table in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and for the first time in 15 years running the Castellano family, he looked like a man who had no idea what to do with his hands. Beside him, his brother-in-law and consigliere, Victor Marchetti, gripped the chart like he could squeeze answers out of the paper. "You said the allergy panel came back clean," Dominic said. His voice was quiet. Quiet from him was worse than shouting. "It did," Park said. "No elevated IgE, no histamine markers. Whatever's causing the swelling, it isn't a standard allergic reaction. I don't have a category for this." "Then make one." In the corner of the room, arms crossed over a cardigan 2 sizes too big for the estate's dress code, stood Odessa Freeman. 34, built solid and broad in a way she'd stopped apologizing around age 19, hired 8 weeks ago to manage a little boy's bedtime and homework, not, as Victor had made clear on her first day, to have opinions in a room full of doctors. She'd kept her mouth shut through the first 3 attacks, told herself it wasn't her place, but she'd watched her mother's face do exactly this for 11 years. Watched her mother swell like bread dough left too long, watched her mother clutch a stomach that doctors insisted was just anxiety, just IBS, just a woman being dramatic, right up till the year her throat closed at the dinner table, and it took 2 neighbors and a steak knife tray as a makeshift airway kit to keep her alive until the ambulance came. Odessa knew this swelling. She'd known it from across the room. "It's not an allergy," she said. Every head turned. Victor's jaw tightened like she'd spoken out of turn in church. "Excuse me," Park said. "His hives," Odessa said, stepping closer despite the 200 pounds of very expensive doctor's ego radiating off the man. "Show me his hives." Park blinked. "He doesn't have hives." "Exactly," Odessa said. Her voice didn't shake. It surprised her how steady it came out. "Real allergic swelling itches like hell, and it comes with a rash. This isn't itchy, is it, baby?" She looked at Nico. He shook his head, a small, miserable motion. "That's because this isn't histamine. It's bradykinin." "I'm sorry," cut in Victor. "Is the nanny running rounds now?" "Let her talk," Dominic said, without looking away from Odessa. "My mother had this her whole life," Odessa said. "Swelling out of nowhere. Face, hands, throat, worst of all her stomach. Doctors told her for a decade it was appendicitis, anxiety, IBS, food allergies. Cut her open twice looking for an appendix that was never the problem.
It's called hereditary angioedema, HAE, genetic, a missing protein called C1 inhibitor that's supposed to keep a chemical called bradykinin in check. Without it, blood vessels leak fluid into the tissue and it just swells. No itching, no rash. Antihistamines don't touch it because histamine was never the problem. Epinephrine barely touches it either, which is exactly what's happening right now. The room went silent, except for the wet whistle of Nico's breathing. It's rare, Odessa said. 1 in 50,000, maybe rarer. Exactly why 14 specialists missed it. They were all looking for the common thing. My mother spent 11 years being told she was fine before someone finally ran the right test. Park's face went from irritated to unnervingly still. C4 complement levels, he murmured, almost to himself. If it's HAE, her C4 would be low even between attacks. It's not on a standard allergy panel. Nobody would have thought to order it. There's a treatment, Odessa said. C1 inhibitor concentrate, IV. It works faster than anything you've tried tonight. Some ERs stock it for exactly this. If you don't have it here, you need it here in the next 20 minutes because that airway is not stabilizing on its own. Dominic didn't ask a second question. He turned to Victor. Get it. I don't care what it costs or who you have to wake up. The next 40 minutes were the longest of Dominic Castellano's life, and he had once sit through a 9-hour hostage negotiation without blinking. A medevac helicopter landed on the estate's back lawn at 2 a.m., carrying a case of C1 inhibitor concentrate from the city's only Level 1 trauma center with stock on hand. Odessa held Nico's hand through the whole thing, murmuring the same thing her mother used to say to calm herself during an attack. Slow air, small breaths, you're not out of air, you're just swollen, it's not the same thing. While Park pushed the medication through an IV line with hands that had finally stopped shaking. 20 minutes later, the whistle in Nico's breathing started to loosen. 30 minutes after that, his eye cracked open. By dawn, the swelling had receded enough that he could say, in a small, croaking voice, that he was hungry. Dominic stood in the doorway of his son's room and watched Odessa spoon broth into a 7-year-old who 12 hours earlier he had genuinely believed he was going to bury. You knew in 14 seconds, he said. 14 specialists took 2 years and never got there. They weren't looking at him, Odessa said, not looking up from the spoon. They were looking at charts and panels and whatever textbook was open on the desk. I grew up watching this exact swelling on my mother's face for 11 years. You don't forget the shape of it. Victor's going to have questions about how a nanny knows more medicine than a room full of MDs. Victor's had questions about me since the day I walked in, Odessa said, mostly about whether I'd fit through the front door. Something flickered across Dominic's face, not quite a smile, but close enough to remember the shape of one. I noticed he never says that when I'm listening. I've got ears. Dominic sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son eat. You could have stayed quiet tonight, kept your head down like everyone else on this staff learned to do around me. I thought about it, Odessa admitted, for about half a second. Then I looked at his face and thought about all the years people looked at my mother's swollen face and decided it was easier to call her dramatic than to actually look. I wasn't doing that to a 7-year-old. Dominic studied her, really studied her, the way he sized up men across a negotiating table, except this felt like something else. The agency that placed you listed you as a general child care hire, nothing about medical knowledge. Because nobody ever asks the nanny what she knows. They ask what she costs and how fast she can get a kid to bed. The ingratitude lasted exactly 6 days.
On the 7th, Nico swelled again, faster this time, worse this time, his tongue thickening inside his mouth before Odessa got him to the clinic. She stood over him, giving the C1 inhibitor herself, hands sure now, while Dominic paced a groove in the rug. "He was fine," Dominic said. "He was doing everything right. New diet, no stress triggers, off every medication that could set it off. Why is this happening again?" Odessa ran the checklist her mother had drilled into her since childhood, the short list of things that could trigger an HAE attack even in someone perfectly managed. Physical trauma, extreme stress, hormonal shifts, and one specific category of medication that could turn a controlled condition lethal almost overnight. Has anyone given him an ACE inhibitor, blood pressure medicine, even a small dose? It's one of the worst known triggers for this. It can cause a swelling attack in someone who's never had HAE symptoms in their life and makes existing attacks catastrophically worse. "He's 7, Dominic said. "He doesn't have blood pressure problems." "Then someone gave him something they shouldn't have," Odessa said quietly. "Or someone gave him something on purpose." The room went very still. Dominic's eyes moved slowly toward the door, toward the hallway, toward the wing of the house where his staff and his family moved in and out of his son's life every day. "Test everything that's gone into his body in the last 48 hours. Food, medicine, vitamins, everything." The lab results came back 2 days later, and it was Odessa who caught what the toxicology report almost buried in medical shorthand. Trace lisinopril, an ACE inhibitor, found in the chocolate milk Nico drank every night before bed. A bedtime ritual exactly one person in the household had insisted on establishing 3 weeks earlier. Victor Marchetti. "He's been consigliere for 11 years, Dominic said, staring at the report like it might rearrange itself into something less true. "He also stands to run this family as regent if something happens to your son and you," Odessa said carefully. "You told me that yourself. Nico's the only blood heir. Take him out, and Victor's the natural fallback until you remarry or name someone else." Dominic said nothing for a long moment. Then he said the 2 words that dropped the temperature of the room. "Set the table." Dinner that night was for family only. Dominic, Nico, recovered, color back in his cheeks, tucked safely upstairs the whole time. Victor and Odessa, standing near the sideboard in a plain black dress, invisible the way she'd learned to be invisible her whole life, watching. Victor talked easily through the first course, refilled his own wine, laughed at something Dominic said about Nico's teacher. He looked, Odessa thought, exactly like a man with nothing to hide, which is usually the most dangerous kind. She'd learned from watching her mother get dismissed by doctor after doctor. "I want to thank you," Dominic said, setting down his fork, "for everything you've done for Nico these past weeks, especially the chocolate milk, every night like clockwork." Victor's hand paused over his wineglass for exactly half a second too long. "It's the least I could do," he said. "The boy needed comfort." "He needed a lot of things," Dominic said. "Comfort, medicine, a blood pressure drug that has no business being anywhere near a 7-year-old, unless someone wanted his airway to close a little faster next time in a house of doctors who'd already decided his condition was untreatable." The color drained from Victor's face in real time. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't," Dominic said, and the word landed like a door slamming. "I've known you 11 years, Victor. I know your lying voice sounds like." Victor's hand moved toward his jacket, slow, deliberate, the motion of a man reaching for leverage he thought he still had.
"He's going for the inside pocket," Odessa said, her voice cutting clean across the table, the same flat certainty she'd used the night she named a disease no one else could see. Dominic was already moving. He caught Victor's wrist before the hand cleared the fabric, twisting hard enough that Victor's own gun clattered onto the white tablecloth, right beside the toxicology report, right beside a boy's untouched glass of chocolate milk that would never be poured again. "You raised me," Dominic said, low and even, pinning Victor's arm to the table. "You held my son the day he was born, and you spent 3 weeks poisoning him a spoonful at a time because you didn't want to wait for a throne. You were going to lose him anyway," Victor spat. 14 doctors couldn't save him. I was just going to make it quieter." 14 doctors missed it, Dominic said. "One person in this house didn't." He didn't look at Victor when he said it. He looked at Odessa. 3 days later, Victor Marchetti was gone from the city, where nobody in the Castellano household asked out loud, and nobody was in a hurry to find out. Nico's C4 levels were finally stable on a preventative medication Odessa had spent 2 nights researching alongside a specialist who for once actually listened when she talked. The chocolate milk ritual continued, minus the poison, minus the almost uncle who'd started it. Dominic stood in the doorway of the kitchen one evening, watching Odessa help his son with fractions at the counter, laughing at something the boy said, entirely unguarded in a way she was never around anyone else in that house. "You could leave," Dominic said. "Name your price. Full severance, a house somewhere quiet, a life where nobody ever points a gun across a dinner table again." Odessa looked up. "Is that an offer or a warning?" "It's a choice," Dominic said. "The only one I've ever given anyone in this family without strings attached." She thought about it, really thought about it, the way she'd thought about staying quiet the night this all started. Thought about the apartment she'd have to go back to, the agencies that would list her again as general childcare, no medical background noted, the years of being sized up and underestimated by people who never once looked past the space she took up in a room. Then she thought about a boy who finally believed her the first time she told him he wasn't out of air. "I already made my choice," Odessa said. "I made it the night I opened my mouth instead of keeping my head down. I'm not walking it back now." Something in Dominic's face loosened, not the mask he wore to captains and rivals, but something underneath it he rarely let anyone else see. "Good," he said, "because nobody in this house is ever calling you just the nanny again." If you loved this gripping Mafia mystery and want more stories where the most overlooked person in the room turns out to be the smartest one in it, like, share, and subscribe for more.